Here's your host, John, with more classic movie reviews.
Welcome to today's show. My name is John. As always, you can subscribe to the show on iTunes or follow the links to social media in the podcast show notes. You can also go to snarkymoviereviews.com to read notes, bios, and other random movie thoughts. Remember, this show is completely free and independent. All I ask is that you jump over to iTunes and give me a review. Today's movie is a patriotic biography of one of the most decorated soldiers of World War I, Sergeant Alvin C. York. Released just days before the attack on Pearl Harbor, this film found wide appeal in a country about to enter World War II.
The actors.
Gary Cooper played the title role of Sergeant Alvin C. York. Gary Cooper was born in Montana in 1901. Both of his parents were English immigrants. The family was well-to-do and owned a large ranch where Cooper spent a good portion of his youth. Cooper spent a couple of years going to school in England before returning to Montana. Cooper was out of school for some time with a hip injury from an automobile accident. In 1920, he finally graduated with the help of a teacher that got him interested in drama. Cooper went to college in Iowa, but he was more successful with painting than drama. He left after about 18 months. In 1924, he followed his parents to Los Angeles, where he eventually got a job as a Western stunt rider for a Poverty Row studio. Cooper didn't care for the stunt work because it was hard on the body and cruel to the horses. He hired an agent and paid for his own screen test. He began to get extra work, like being a Roman guard in Ben-Hur 1925. These roles slowly increased until he signed with Samuel Goldwyn in 1926. His first big film was The Winning of Barbara Worth, 1926, with Ronald Colman and Velma Banky. Cooper signed a 5-year deal with Paramount. His relationship with Clara Bow led to roles in Children of Divorce, 1927, and Wings, 1927. Wings, 1927, was the first picture to win a Best Picture Oscar. Cooper also started making westerns. Beginning in 1928, Cooper was paired with a succession of leading ladies trying to find the right chemistry. These actresses included Fay Wray, Evelyn Brent, Florence Vidor, and Esther Ralston. In 1928, he was in Lilac Time with Colleen Moore, which was his first picture with synchronized music and sound effects. Cooper became a major star with the release of The Virginian, 1929. Based on the success of this film, he was cast in a number of westerns and war movies. Cooper's next big hit was as a Legionnaire in Morocco, 1930, with Marlene Dietrich. Cooper allegedly picked the director up by his collar during an argument. After several more films, Cooper left Hollywood for an extended European vacation and rest. He returned in 1932, ready to act and ready to negotiate better contracts. After finishing Devil in the Deep, 1932, with Tallulah Bankhead, Cooper jumped into one of his important films, A Farewell to Arms, 1932, with Helen Hayes. Cooper made a lot of movies during this time, and many were very good. Fighting his way along in The Lives of a Bengal Lancer, 1935, to Everyman in Mr. Deeds Goes to Town, for which he was Oscar-nominated, Taming the Wild West as Buffalo Bill Hickok in The Plainsman, 1936, and Exploring China in The Adventures of Marco Polo. Following some so-so movies, Cooper went on to star in director William A. Wellman's adventure Beau Geste, 1939. The next year, he returned to westerns with The Westerner, 1940, fighting against Judge Roy Bean and his corrupt laws west of the Pecos. This was followed by director Cecil B. DeMille's Northwest Mounted Police, 1940. Cooper found the Everyman again with Meet John Doe, 1941. Cooper made 2 more films that were released in 1941 and directed by Howard Hawks. The first was Sergeant York, 1941, a movie based on the most decorated soldier of World War I, and a movie I always enjoy watching. Cooper earned his first Oscar for Sergeant York, 1941. The second movie was Ball of Fire, 1941, a comedy with Barbara Stanwyck. The next year, Cooper scored another hit with The Pride of the Yankees, 1942, followed the next year by For Whom the Bell Tolls, 1943. Cooper helped with the war effort and continued to make movies. Some of the best are You're in the Navy Now, 1951, a wartime comedy, Distant Drums, 1951, directed by Raoul Walsh, High Noon, 1952, for which he won another Oscar, Springfield Rifles, 1952, The Court Martial of Billy Mitchell, 1955, about a military commander between World War I and World War II working for aviation. Friendly Persuasion, 1956, where he played a Quaker that was being affected by the Civil War, and They Came to Cordura, 1959, with Rita Hayworth, where Cooper played a coward who was forced to face what makes a man a coward or a hero. Cooper was a founding member of the Motion Picture Alliance for the Preservation of American Ideals, a conservative organization dedicated, according to its statement of principles, to preserving the American way of life and opposing communism and fascism. Other members included Walt Disney, Clark Gable, Ronald Reagan, Barbara Stanwyck, and John Wayne. They pressured the United States Congress to investigate communist influences in the motion picture industry. In 1947, Cooper appeared before the House Un-American Activities Committee, HUAC, and was asked if he had observed any communistic influences in Hollywood. He did not, however, name names. Cooper died in 1961 at the very early age of 60. Walter Brennan played the role of Pastor Roser Pyle, spiritual leader for young Alvin. Brennan was covered in episode 67, The Buccaneers, 1938. Joan Leslie played the role of Gracie Williams, Alvin York's girlfriend. Joan Leslie was born Joan Agnes Teresa Sadie Brodell in 1925 in Michigan. Joan's sisters, Betty and Mary Brodell, began playing musical instruments very early in life as a result of their mother's influence. The duo began playing in front of audiences, and Joan made it a trio when she was 2.5. When the Depression hit in full force, the girls' father lost his job. The young girls began working in vaudeville to support the family under the name of the Three Brodells. To bypass child labor laws, the girls often had to lie about their ages. As the youngest, Joan stole the show with her cuteness and talent. In 1936, Joan was offered a short-term contract with MGM. Her first role was in Camille, 1936, but all her lines were edited out. At the end of her contract, she went to New York, where she worked in radio and modeled. Her older sister Mary signed with Universal Studios, and the entire family moved to Hollywood. Joan worked as a studio freelancer and made many pictures for RKO. Joan was cast in the William A. Wellman directed Men with Wings, 1936. When he found out she was only 13, he replaced her with her sister Mary for the remainder of the film. Joan's first credited role came in Winter Carnival, 1939, because she could do a Southern accent. In 1941, Joan was signed to Warner Brothers and got her first big break when she was cast in High Sierra, 1941, with Humphrey Bogart and Ida Lupino. It was also at this time that her name was changed to Joan Leslie so she wouldn't be confused with Joan Blondell. So at the age of 15, she played the role of the crippled Velma. Later that year, she was cast as Gracie Williams, the girlfriend of Alvin York, Gary Cooper, in Sergeant York. I certainly believe she was from the country. Joan worked with Olivia de Havilland in The Male Animal, 1942. She then went on to star in Yankee Doodle Dandy, 1942, opposite James Cagney in a role that took full advantage of her vaudeville talents. Joan made 4 movies in 1943, The Hard Way with Ida Lupino, The Sky's the Limit with Fred Astaire, This is the Army with Ronald Reagan, and Thank Your Lucky Stars. Joan also worked at the Hollywood Canteen during World War II, entertaining servicemen. She was in a movie titled Hollywood Canteen, 1944, with a cavalcade of stars. By 1946, Joan was tired of the role she had been given and sued Warner Brothers for release from her contract. Jack Warner got her blacklisted from most of the major studios. She did 2 pictures for a Poverty Row studio, Eagle Lion Films, and made Repeat Performance 1947, a film noir, and Northwest Stampede 1948. In the early 1950s, Joan took off time to raise her family. In 1952, she signed a short-term deal with Republic Pictures. Flight Nurse 1953 was released and did well. Joan's last film was The Revolt of Mamie Stover, 1956. Joan worked in television for a bit until she retired in 1991. Joan Leslie died in 2015 at the age of 90. York's army buddy, Pusher Ross, was played by George Tobias. Tobias was in quite a few films, including Yankee Doodle Dandy, 1942, The Setup, 1949, and The Seven Little Foys, 1955. However, to me and many others, he will always be the henpecked husband Abner Kravitz on television's Bewitched from 1964 to 71. Margaret Wirchley played Mother York. She was a good and decent woman in this film. I will only mention one other role where she was a mother. That film was White Heat, 1949. Top of the world, Ma, top of the world. Ward Bond played the role of Ike Botkin, young Alvin's drinking buddy. Bond was first covered in episode 53, It's a Wonderful Life, 1946. The younger siblings of Alvin York were June Lockhart, who played Rosie, and was covered in episode 26, Time Limit, 1957, and Dickie Moore, who played George, and was covered in episode 54, Out of the Past, 1947.
Story.
It is 1916 at the Three Forks of the Wolf River in Tennessee. It's so far back in the woods they had to pump in sunshine. Pastor Rozier Powell, Walter Brennan, is delivering an old-fashioned sermon. The congregation hears a loud disturbance outside. Alvin C. York, Gary Cooper, Ike Botkin, Ward Bond, and Buck Lipscomb, Noah Berry Jr., are riding their horses, a-rootin' and a-tootin' and a-shootin'. They were drunk as hoots, and Alvin shoots his initials into a nearby tree. The pastor turns the meeting out, and they all see A.Y. shot into the tree. Mama York, Margaret Wycherly, says sadly that it's mighty good shooting for someone that was drunk. The next day at Pastor Powell's general store, the men are gathering. A fancy salesman is trying to sell city clothes to Pastor Powell. When the men get the paper, they are only interested in local news, although the headline talks about the war going on in Europe.
Now look, Mr. Pyle, I'd like to sell you some of these garments before the price goes up on account of the war.
What war?
Well, the war in Europe.
Oh, that war.
Yes, certainly. Looks like the Germans might get into Paris, don't you think?
Well, we ain't done much thinking on it, mister. It ain't in our corner nohow.
If you're hankering for trouble, it ain't scarce right here on these mountains.
Oh, I ain't looking for any trouble.
The men are jawing about some of the wild stuff Alvin had done when Mama York walks into the store. The men shut up. She tells the pastor that she is proud of Alvin because he works so hard, but thinks he needs some religion. She asks the pastor to talk to Alvin. Mama York sends her youngest son, George, Dickie Moore, to go to the bar and find Alvin. You kids go find your daddy before the sun comes up and they see him laying in the yard. Alvin and his two buddies are drinking, and Alvin is eyeing one of the barflies. George comes into the bar and tells Alvin that their mother wants him home. He levels the gun on his brother. The man with the barfly mocks him, and a fairly large fight breaks out. Alvin wins the fight, and George reminds him that Ma wants him home. Alvin is ashamed when he gets home. His mother throws a bucket of water on him, and his sister Rosie, June Lockhart, gives him a towel. Then Ma feeds him breakfast before sending him out to plow the field. Alvin is out plowing a rocky field when Pastor Powell comes up and tells Alvin that he's been plowing around a rock for years and he needs to straighten his rows and his life. Alvin says he needs to have religion come to him. The pastor says sometimes it comes slow and sometimes it comes fast. Not long after that, Alvin, George, and 3 hound dogs are out fox hunting. They go by a marker showing where Daniel Boone killed a bear in 1760. The dogs run by a house where a pretty young girl, Gracie Williams, Joan Leslie, is sitting on the porch. When Alvin sees her, he is twitterpated.
They took to the hill yard. Yeah, that way. You're Alvin York, ain't you?
Yes?
Well, let's get going, Alvin.
I ain't seen you in a coon's age. Why you been keeping yourself?
Yeah, Box.
What's ailing you? Are you coming or ain't you?
Hey, you better go get that fox, George.
You're just tased.
She knows him, but he doesn't recognize her right off because she has grown up. That night, Alvin starts asking his mother about setting up, getting married. Ma York asks who the girl is, and he tells her Gracie. Ma York knows Alvin is not ready for marriage. Zeb Andrews, Robert Porterfield, is at Gracie's house courting when Alvin shows up. Zeb and Alvin start trading verbal barbs. Alvin asks Gracie for a drink, and as soon as she leaves, Alvin grabs Zeb and runs him off. Gracie rages on Alvin, and he announces he is going to marry her. She tells him she wouldn't have him on a Christmas tree.
I wouldn't have you on a Christmas tree, Alvin York.
fine husband you'd make.
I allow Zeb Andrews would make a better one.
Well, how should I know? Maybe he would.
Zeb Andrews got a piece of bottom land. That's it, ain't it?
You thinking that's it, are you? Folks say you're no good except for fighting and hell-raising, and I'm thinking they're plumb right.
Alvin jumps to the conclusion it's because he doesn't own a good piece of bottom land like Zeb does. Alvin talks to his mother about getting some bottom land, and she tells him that his father tried and failed. Alvin is determined that nothing will stop him. Alvin goes to see Mr. Thompson, who is selling some bottom land. Alvin sells his mule, hens, pelts, and some other stuff for $50 credit towards the $120 cost of the land. Tompkins is very clear that Alvin only has 60 days to earn the other $70.
Well, how much time have I got to pay for the rest?
60 days.
Well, it's a bargain. I'll take it.
Well, then I reckon we can put it in writing. You understand now, don't you, Alvin? If I don't get my money before the 60 days, you lose the whole caboodle and you don't get the land.
He moved rocks, pulled stumps, and split rails for pay. He kept his farm going and hunted for pelts to make more money. One evening while he was out plowing, Gracie comes by and kisses him. Darn near an engagement. York keeps his totals on a calendar, and as time nears, he has $44.35 of the 60 he needs. One night, as he passes out, Mama York covers him with a blanket and prays over him. Alvin goes to see Mr. Tompkins and asks for 4 extra days to get the money. Alvin explains that there is a shooting contest, and if he wins, he will have all the money. Tompkins agrees, but says there is another man trying to buy the land. On the day of the turkey shoot, the men are shooting at a real turkey, which I assume is tied behind a log. The turkey is a wise creature and won't stick his head up so that they can shoot him. All the men are missing their shot. When it's Alvin's turn, he whets his front sight and gobbles like a turkey. When the bird looks up, he shoots it through the eye. After the turkey shoot, they have a target shoot with 5 places or parts of a cow, or a beef critter as they call it in the film. Alvin trades in the bird for a shot and buys 4 more. He is hoping to win the whole cow, then sell it back to get the money he needs. When the others find out what he is up to, they start teasing him and comparing him to Daniel Boone. Alvin wins all 5 prizes and sells the others another chance to shoot for the cow. They make sure he is not shooting against them on the second try. About the time Alvin gets the money he needs, Mr. Tompkins and Zeb come walking up. Alvin tries to pay Mr. Tompkins, but he says their deal wasn't in writing and he has already sold the land to Zeb. Alvin flies into a rage and the pair run away as Alvin's friends and the pastor hold him back. Gracie tells Alvin it don't make no difference, but he says it does to him. He heads off towards the whiskey in Kentucky and his 2 friends follow. As they drink, a storm rages outside. Alvin gets increasingly sullen as he drinks. He heads out in the storm to kill Mr. Tompkins. Lightning flashes by him, and when he wakes up, the mule is on the ground and his rifle barrel is split. The lightning has knocked the shoes off the mule, but it's alive. As he walks on in the rain, he comes to the church and walks in the door. The pastor has the congregation singing old-time religion as Alvin joins in with the group. Not long after Alvin's religious conversion, he goes to Mr. Tompkins. Tompkins grabs a wrench and tries to keep Alvin at bay. Alvin apologizes and buys his old mule back for $20. Tompkins gives him the clock back, saying it doesn't work anyway. Next, Alvin goes to see Zeb, but Zeb hides from him. When he realizes Alvin is not going to hurt him, he comes out. Alvin asks if he can work on Zeb's land. Zeb says he will let Alvin sharecrop the land. Finally, he goes to see Gracie. He says he is sorry for coming between her and Zeb. She gets mad and says she could have Zeb if she wanted, and that she doesn't kiss men she ain't gonna marry. Then Gracie runs off crying. Alvin begins teaching Sunday school and is a real fundamentalist Bible believer. About that time, news comes in that the U.S. has entered World War I and the draft is beginning again. Pastor Pyle's store is the local place for men to sign up for the draft. Some are enlisting before they are drafted, and when they ask Alvin, he says he will wait to be called. Pastor Pyle calls Alvin aside and says he has not registered. Alvin explains that the Bible is against killing, and so he is against killing.
War is killing, and the book's again killing. So war is again the book.
Pastor agrees to write a letter for Alvin saying he is against killing. The local board rejects Alvin's appeal letter. Alvin and Gracie make big plans for their wedding and the house they are going to build. The pastor calls Alvin in, and he has been rejected by the district and national boards. At first, Alvin says he won't go because it's against the Bible. But he realizes he is wrong. The pastor tells him to trust in the Lord. The York family is very sad to see Alvin go. He gives his rifle to his brother George. Gracie comes by and kisses Alvin before she runs off crying. Alvin says, "I'll be a-comin' back." Alvin is sent from Nashville to Camp Gordon, Georgia. The officers and the sergeants are notified that Alvin has applied for exemption as a conscientious objector. One of Alvin's friends is a New York subway worker named Pusher Ross, George Tobias.
Subway, you say?
Yeah.
What's this here subway you're talking about?
You mean to say you don't know what a subway is? That guy kidding?
No, they don't have subways where he comes from, I guess.
They haven't. Ain't they civilized? Where you from?
Pall Mall, Valley of the Three Forks of the Wolf,
Where's that?
Tennessee.
Ain't you ever even seen a subway?
Ain't never even heard of one.
You never what? Heard? Heard? What kind of talk is that? Do they all talk that kind of English where you come from?
Well, they ain't any English people down our way, just Americans.
When Alvin gets his rifle, the sergeant is starting to hound him. Soon after, they head to the rifle range. His first shot is low and to the right. He figures the sights are off, and he gets 5 bullseyes next. When an officer asks him where he learned to shoot, he says he always knew how. Back at the barracks, he teaches the men about hunting. Alvin is called to report to Major Burton. Burton and Captain Danforth tell him that the sergeant has recommended him for corporal to teach shooting. Alvin explains his objection to killing, and he and Captain Danforth have a religious debate. Burton pulls out a copy of the History of the United States. Alvin sees a picture of Daniel Boone and is very interested. The major talks about defending freedom. Burton gives Alvin a 10-day leave, and he says that when he comes back, he will let him out of the army if he still wants to get out. Alvin takes the history book with him. Back at home, Alvin and one of his hound dogs go to a high rock where Alvin can think in private.
Want me to be a set in 4 places more or just 3?
Can't say, child.
Why, ain't Alvin ever gonna eat again?
The book says, man don't live by bread alone.
Well, what about that there hound dog he's got with him? He can't read the book.
The Bible blows open, and Alvin reads in the Bible, "Render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and unto God the things that are God's." He decides he has a duty to the country as well as to God. Alvin returns to camp, and before long he sails for France as part of the All-American Division under the overall command of General John Blackjack Pershing. Back home, Pastor Powell reads Alvin's letters to Gracie and the family, saying that he will be moving up to the front soon. Alvin and some men are in the trenches with a couple of British soldiers that are telling them how to determine if shells are going to hit you or pass over. One of the men they went through training with, Bert, is killed by shrapnel. The division takes part in the Meuse-Argonne offensive, which is sometimes called the Battle of the Argonne Forest. Note, by this time the Russians were out of the war, and the British, French, Italians, and Germans were just about spent. The huge influx of fresh Americans helped force the war to an end. Alvin's unit is ordered to attack on October 8, 1918 at 6:10 a.m. following an artillery barrage. The barrage never comes, but they go over the top anyway. The Germans open up with machine guns and mortars. As the Americans get bogged down in no man's land, Alvin and some of the others are sent around on a flanking attack. They get in the German trenches and fight hand to hand. When the Americans come over the hill behind the Germans, most of the Germans surrender. A German machine gun turns on the Americans and kills most of them as the German prisoners duck. Alvin is now the senior man on the attack. Alvin crawls across the open and knocks out the German machine gun with rifle fire.
5 will get you 10. That guy knocks off your whole sauerkraut army.
There are 25 machine guns on that bridge. Tell him it's useless.
What did you say?
I said tell him it's useless.
Well, you tell him. You talk better English than I do.
In the movie, Alvin uses his backwoods hunting skills to clean out a trench of Germans. They gather up all the Germans, and one throws a grenade, killing Pusher. When the killer runs, they shoot him down. York and the 7 men that are left start moving the prisoners back towards where the American lines are located. They have between 50 and 75 prisoners. They use the German-speaking officer to make more Germans surrender. Finally, they have 132 German prisoners, and when they get close to the American lines, the men there think it's a trick. No one will take the prisoners off their hands. As the group moves along the line, rumors run wild about what Alvin and his company has done.
Say, Sarge, did you hear? York captured the Kaiser.
Later at the attack site, Alvin explains to the general what happened. They ask how many men he killed, and Danforth says he saw 20 bodies. York explains that he is still against killing and did what he did to save American lives. Sergeant Alvin York was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross, Medal of Honor, the French Croix de Gras, the French Legion of Honor, the Italian Croix de Gras al Martero, and the Montenegro French War Medal. The congressman from his district back in Tennessee, Cordell Hull, meets the returning Alvin on the dock. He meets the mayor of New York and was given a ticker tape parade and a key to the city. He asked only for a ride on the Bronx Express subway to honor his friend Pusher. They put him in a fancy hotel and show him all the endorsement offers he has received. Alvin calls home and talks to his mother and Gracie. Alvin lets everyone know that he is not proud of what he did in France and will not make money off of it. He simply wants to go home. When Alvin gets home, the pastor tells him he is the biggest hero from these parts since Andrew Jackson and Daniel Boone. When he gets back to Gracie, they go to see the bottomland. Alvin doesn't think he has any way to marry Gracie. There's a bridge over the stream and a nice house for the couple.
There. Now you can look. What do you see, Alvin? Tell me. It's yours, Alvin. It's all yours. They give it to you, the people of the state of Tennessee, for what you done.
You mean?
Oh, it's 200 acres, and the house is bigger with more windows, and the kitchen's got a pump.
This has been donated to them by the state of Tennessee. The governor will marry the couple on their own 200 acres of bottomland. Alvin and Gracie walk away hand in hand.
Here's the world-famous short summary.
Country couple has a hard time getting married. If you enjoyed this week's show, please tell your friends, and if you really want to help, drop over to iTunes and give me a review. If you want to comment, recommend a movie, or just say hi, follow the links in the show notes to my site. Beware the Moors. Let's be frank. You never wanted to give me a review on iTunes. You come to me this day, on the day of my daughter's wedding, and you ask me, give me a movie review. But you never come to my house in friendship. You never wanted to drink coffee with me. Had you gone to iTunes and given me a review, this day I would give you a movie review.